Rebecca Tripp, known as the metaphysical flight attendant, who is an author, spiritual coach, and creative manifestress on a mission, living under the premise perfect health is your birthright. She had an NDE-like experience and a spontaneous healing from cancer, a cancer diagnosis. She's a Silver Method facilitator. Let's welcome today's guest, Rebecca Tripp. Our next guest, Steve Noack, is an NDE near-death experiencer, survivor, quantum healer, and zero-point healing practitioner. At a very young age, Steve was struck by a motor vehicle, and this event bioelectrically connected him to the quantum field. During his NDE, he experienced sitting with a being comprised solely of light. And the next guest is Amanda Wideman, who has spent time in over 25 countries. This exposure made her appreciate and value diversity, which also gave her an opportunity to work with people from all walks of life. Her 13 years of experience as a paramedic and 8 years in emergency housing for mental health and addictions. She also experienced an NDE in 2017 that initiated a radical shift in her life. So here we are. And it's very interesting because I've interviewed each one of you on an individual basis for my YouTube channel. And I find the concept of what people have experienced, and maybe we'll be able to share a little bit of that. I've never done this before, bringing three people together, trying to initiate the storyline. But maybe we'll start off with Rebecca.
Sure.
Yeah. You can give us a little bit of a background of what happened in your life in terms of going from or being a flight attendant and having that motivation to seek and to know more.
Well, it all started when I was a little girl, but I did have an experience that shifted my thought for the rest of my life. And that was having 3 UFOs fly in over the Atlantic Ocean and then kind of hover over my head before they went back out to sea. And it was kind of like mind-bending because they didn't make any noise. They did the right angle turns. I saw them very clearly. And I said to myself, I want to know where those are coming from. So I got very motivated to join the airlines, which I did. In less than a year after that, I was a stewardess living out of Chicago. And it was almost like, I look back on it and, I almost think whoever's in those UFOs program us, because I picked United Airlines. I ended up being based in Chicago at the beginning of my career, which put me in a building where I met my first metaphysical teacher, a guy named Ron Shove, who was the nephew of a very famous metaphysical teacher, Earl Shove, who's trained people like Jim Romm and, many, many people had connections with, and he taught me how to visualize. And I did it so well. I've been studying stuff ever since. Many, many years later, I'm still studying it. But I learned how to manifest using my imagination to, create what I wanted, and it would just show up magically in my life. But then when I was in my mid-20s, I got a bad diagnosis from a doctor. My greatest fear came upon me. I had a terrible fear of cancer, and sure enough, he said, "You've got early cancer, surgery for you next week." And I was horrified. I did not want that option. So I said, "Well, what if I don't do that?" And he said, "You'll be dead by the time you're 40. That was even worse. So I went to a spiritual healer. She happened to be a Christian Science practitioner. I had a spontaneous healing right there on the spot after she had spoken to me for about 30 minutes. Bingo. My consciousness opened up. I guess my crown chakra. I met my higher self. I was in that level of consciousness they called the Christ. Every cell in my body changed. And it was a very, very enlightening experience. For 3 days, I walked around Belvedere, Marin County in an altered state of consciousness. And I was almost like feeling like I was psychotic, though. Everything was beautiful in nature, but the people I had to deal with, I could see the phoniness and the mechanicalness of my roommates and my friends, and I had to get the hell out of there. So I moved back. Thank God it only lasted 3 days. I would have ended up in a mental institution. But that's what happened to me. So I flew for 35 years. And after that, I started teaching people how to get down to the alpha theta level with the Silver Ultramind course, which I taught all over the country. I wrote my book, Secrets of a Metaphysical Flight Attendant. And I have a course called the Mega Manifestation Method, which is on my website, RebeccaTripp.com. I'm a metaphysical junkie.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. I think what's good is that we could each share a little bit of your story, and then we could just like ask questions that will like tie together some of the themes that exist. Ray, how are you? Welcome.
Hey, how you doing?
Okay, good. I'll read you a little bit about your bio after you just came on. Maybe Steve, you want to share a little bit about your experience of what happened and what you've been doing? I can't hear you.
Okay. Unmute, that would help.
Okay.
Okay. So at 4 years old, I had an experience where I was hit on a car, well, on a like a tricycle by a car. I was driving out between two parked cars, going across the street. I wasn't really paying attention, of course. A woman was drinking, so she struck me on like a plastic tricycle called a big wheel, and I went under the car. She brought me to like the end of the road underneath the car, and I remember everything fading away, and then waking up with what I thought was a person at first. I'm leaning on someone. I'm thinking, who is this? I open my eyes and I see long white, like silver hair. It's almost touching the ground, and like the bottom of a robe or a tunic or something. I didn't know what a tunic was, so it looked like a bathrobe. And I turned to see who it was, and it was a being made of light with a hood. And we engaged in conversation. I asked what had happened. They said, you were in an accident. You're going to be okay. You know, just relax. And I'm thinking, and I remember having the recollection, I wasn't moving my mouth, you know, trying to make sense of it. And the more I did, the more I was pulled into this being's face, and I saw a world that I would think to be like heaven for us. And as soon as I saw it and I felt it, and all the colors were alive, and you could feel like waves of children's laughter. And as soon as it hit me, it was like I knew everything was one, and it all came from love. And it was divvied up from there, divided. And that was my identity. And I wanted to go there naturally. I knew pain, also that pain couldn't exist there, suffering, hate. Not that it didn't, it couldn't vibrate high enough to reach that creation, whatever you want to call it, or manifestation. So I wanted to go there. They said, it's not your time. We have other things to show you. The next thing I know is I'm in like a field, like a quantum field, but it looked like a blueprint with all lines and squares, like you would kind of look like a computer program almost. And they explained to me, this is the quantum field. Reality for humans is built from your thought, and then it seeds into your heart, and then it's expressed and cycles through you. And then you experience reality, or your perception of it. You spend your energy to have an experience, and your frequency gets dissipated, but you can call all this back into the now, into one again. They taught me how to generate electric potential between the mind and the heart to basically discharge cellular memory programs, really take control of the system and embody the Christ. So they led me to that, breaking through that wall, combining heaven and earth on one, and different things like that. And so at 4 years old, I didn't remember entirely. I knew something different had happened. In my teens, I could start to remember some, but didn't share it with anybody. So I grew up pretty normal, hiding it. And then in my late 30s, early 30s, the voice returned again. I was having surgery for, you know, a recent accident, you know, car accidents and many close calls. And the voice returned and said my name and told me to put my head down. Everything would be all right, because I was getting really filled with anxiety. And it was like an energy covered me. All these memories and experiences started flooding in, like somebody because as soon as I recognized that voice, it was on. And then it was separating reality from reality, literally. I thought I was crazy for a long time. I couldn't separate what I was seeing as well, because I could see my own projections coming out from me. And I understood that the things I was seeing around me were coming from me, and that I had to adjust my frequency and tune in something different. And so it led me to self-exploration. And then I was a retail store manager. I had a woman fall down outside my store, and I put my hand on her, which wasn't like me at the time, but I was going through something. And I just instinctively put my hand on her, and she said, "I'm all warm and I have no pain." And she was elderly. She hit the cement. She was in pain. And so I thought about it and thought about it, and then just many other psychic experiences, you could say. And then it led me to purification, making positive and negative one within myself so that I have control over my charge, over multidimensionality, things like that. And then here I am years later, hundreds of clients, and I lead them to themselves. I help them remember what they are by pushing their nervous system over a threshold, so to speak, by holding that space.
Yeah. Excellent. It did, I see in terms of each person in the group feeling some of the understanding of that their personal experiences relatable to, I guess, what Steve just said. I know for myself, as an individual, thankfully not having an NDE, but having the out of body experiences as a child, which put me into that place of looking at things from a different perspective, and then going through my own physical ailments, and then pushing forward and breaking through to that somewhat of the understanding of a little bit of what you speak. Maybe Amanda, you can just share a little bit about your experiences, please.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having all of us on today. In 2017, I was in a car accident, and another car crossed the double center line and lost control, and our car flipped upside down and landed with the roof crushed and the wheels up, and we were on a high mountain road. So where our car landed was like the concrete guardrail just before the cliff drops. So when the car arrested, like the front half and the hood was kind of dangling over the edge, and then the back half was on the roadside. So kind of like a seesaw. And I'd been working as a paramedic for a long time in that area, and it was really well known for cars to just fly over the edge. Very rarely did people survive. So as soon as our car lost control, I had this very split second belief, like, okay, we're going over the edge. It was like almost like just a firm belief. And at that point, I had a spontaneous out of body experience. And what happened for me, time slowed down, kind of like the same thing everyone seems to experience. And I felt a immediate loss of all my senses. I couldn't hear anything. It got really muffled. Everything was dark, and there was a massive weightlessness that I'd never experienced before. And then I noticed I perceived, because I didn't really have my eyes about me, but I was in this kind of black, pillowy, feathery, soft dimension is what I call it. And immediately I realized that I wasn't alone, and I was almost trying to perceive, like, who is here? Someone's here or something. And as time just kind of like continued to go along and slow down, I realized it was the presence of many. And the only way that I knew that was because I knew I'd been there before. There was a massive familiarity, and it was more than familiarity. Like, I think I've been here before. It was like, finally, I'm home. Like, this is what I've been searching for my whole life. And I didn't encounter any beings or any Jesus or angels or anything. It was just like, I knew that all of them were there, plus many more that I had forgotten about while I was on Earth. And all of my awkwardness and my anxiety and insecurities, everything got left in the body. And it was my first relief. It was my first time to not feel any of those things. And what remained was just this real sense of innocence and curiosity and like childlike wonder, but almost more than anything, like reunion and reconnection with who really knows me. And it was like they could see me and understand me for not what I had done and not what had happened to me, but my true nature. And I could perceive them in the same way. And then, yeah, and then as quick as that happened, we woke up. I woke up back into my body. I was upside down in the car, and I was in a pretty straight up state of bliss for a couple of years. And then, yeah, a couple of years, I quit my job as a paramedic. I was with my partner for 13 years, and I left him. I went and I lived in the forest in my van. I couldn't be around people because I was really kind of like what you both were saying. I could really sense the inauthenticity all around me, not just in people, but in structures and the way that society ran. And it was too overwhelming. And then after that, I came out. I started going to some ayahuasca ceremonies, a lot of ceremonies in a short time. I suddenly felt drawn. And in those ceremonies, I almost continued what I think, I call it kind of like the threshold of a higher dimension, is where I went in my out of body experience. But the ceremonies also took me out of my body, but on some next steps. And so through those out of body experiences and some pretty powerful dreams in those few years, I started to go into like a long-term life review, the spontaneous memories coming back. And that's kind of slowed down now. And now it's my priority and my focus when I'm clear, is what Steve said, just the purification. It's absolutely necessary to keep going on this path.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Let's go to Ray. Ray, let me just give everybody, the audience, a little bit of background about you. So Ray Feurstein had steeped into the paranormal since the age of 5, when he had 2 near-death experiences. And he likes to say they're near-life experiences because he feels being dead and coming back is more of a near-life than a near-death experience. He runs his own electronic repair service and is an accomplished musician. He's also a law enforcement officer where he lives and a police academy instructor. So Ray, how are you? I can't hear you. Oh. Maybe click on the thing. I think it says to unmute.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. That was weird. Oh, good. How's everybody there?
Everybody's good. Everybody's, it's a nice experience to have like-minded people share their experiences and to see, what we come up with in terms of an understanding of what took place.
So none of us must be politicians then.
No politicians, but maybe you'll share a little bit about what took place in terms of your 2 near-death experiences. Steve had something very similar in terms of having 2 experiences himself, remembering a little bit from the childhood after the second one, I think, or something to that effect.
Well,
in terms of your case.
Well, I was stung by a black wasp and went into anaphylactic shock. I mean, I was mobile for a while. I was 5 years old. And when I came in the house, my mother and sister were in there, and they kind of screamed a little bit. And I couldn't hardly see. And later on, it was described to me as I looked like the Michelin tire boy. I was blown up and puffed up, and my father was away, and my godfather came over and had a police car. That's how I was transported, no ambulance. At that time, it was 57. And the last thing I remember is the police officer saying to me, "How would you like the siren and the lights on?" And I go, "Yeah." And that was it until I finally woke up in the hospital. But in between there, I didn't have any white light experiences or anything like that. I was on a gray, black, purple type twister, sitting in the top of it. That's how it felt. That's what it looked like. And I was just riding on it. There was no noise. except for these voices that were reassuring and very comforting, and don't be afraid, things like that, male and female, but mostly male. And I traveled for a little while, and then I came upon this area, and at the time I figured it was a room, but I don't know. And it was pitch black. I mean, the blackest black you could think of, but with white dots, pure white, very focused white dots. And in the white dots, it was like a beam of light. You couldn't see the beam, but you could see the spot of light. It was probably I mean, about 8 feet in diameter, and there was people standing around it, but I couldn't see them clearly. And inside the circles of light were kids playing. And I happened to tool up or whirl up, I guess you would say, to one of them, and there was 3 kids about my age playing with puppies. And the little girl was dressed in, she was blonde. She had ribbons in her hair. She had a tan with blue flowers, tan dress on with blue flowers, patent leather shoes. I know patent leather now because I could describe them, and I learned what they were, and like matching socks. I mean, it was as clear as day to me as it is today. The same. It's like a picture in my mind. And there was 2 boys, and they were dressed very well too. But the little girl's the only one that talked to me. She says, "Come on down and play with us." And I went to climb out, and the voice says, "You can't do that. You can't go there." And the little girl says, "Well, if you can't come down here, here's a puppy." And she raised her hands up and reached a puppy up to me. And I went down to touch it. And that's when I felt this tremendous shock. And everything went blank. And I woke up with this sheet over my face. They had pronounced me dead. They had packed me in ice to bring the swelling down. They pumped me with whatever, probably epinephrine then too. And, but I didn't wake up. So they pronounced me dead there. And I took my hands and flipped the sheets down and yelled at, there's a nurse and a doctor, and I won't forget it. I yelled at them, "Where's my mommy?" And they both screamed because I scared the living crap out of them, or the dead crap, I don't know. But either way, they screeched, and I just felt I was tingly and very itchy all over, and it was probably because of the swelling and everything. But I'll never forget that jolt that I got when I touched the puppy. It was like it was a tone and like a heavy vibration, high vibration. It went boom like that. And it was like just jarred me awake. And they didn't use paddles on me. I asked later about that. And then the second time I was 17, getting ready to go to my prom. And it was like 3 or 4 days before it, and I had gotten a real bad stomach ache. And my father was treating with Pepto-Bismol and bromous ulcers to settle the stomach and everything. And then I woke up one morning, it was 104.4 degrees temperature. And he goes, "Well, we got to take you to the doctor." And went to our GP, it was an old country doctor kind of sort. And he goes, "To the hospital, he's got appendicitis." And so I got in the hospital, and I was laying on a gurney. It was a pre-op, I guess it was. They were just taking my vitals, doing stuff like that. And I was talking to my father, and I said to him, all of a sudden, I mean, I was amount of pain with appendicitis, and it was nauseating. It was just really doubling over type pain. And all of a sudden it went away. I felt great. And I told my father, and I said, "Dad, I'm okay. I don't have to stay here." He goes, "Why?" I go, "I feel great." Well, I didn't know it, but my appendix burst inside me. and of course took all the pressure off of everything. And he went and got the nurse, and the nurse came running in. Of course, at that point in time, they found me dead. They rushed me in, tried to revive me. I guess obviously they revived me, or else you're talking to a ghost. Um, and but during the time I was gone, that second time, the first time as a 5-year-old, I didn't have much worldly experience to imagine anything. You know what I mean? It was 5 years old. You don't have much, few friends, And this time, it was like 17, and I'm cruising through this whiteness, and everything started to kind of like like fade in, like pieces of building, ground, people, voices chattering. I also had somebody standing on either side of me and the back of me talking to me, telling me everything's going to be all right. The reassuredness thing was always there. And I remember a woman, she was probably in her 50s, early 50s, with very 50-ish hair, style, and pretty in a white gown. And she had a pendant around her neck with a blue stone in it. And she says, "Hi, Ray. Don't worry about anything. You're all right." I was never worried either. I wasn't afraid. It was just, there was no fear there. It was just plain cool. Just, hey, this is great. I'm feel good. You feel good. Everybody, it was great. It was like the 60s without the pot. You're just kind of like happy. It's just a very happy thing. And she says, I don't know if you know me, but my name is Rose. I'm your grandmother." And I went, "Oh, really?" I said, "Holy cow, never met you. I know you passed away before I was born." And she says, "Yeah." She says, "I'm your mom's mom. So I'm your mother's mother, and I'm your mother. You're your grandmother." I said, "Oh." She says, "You've got to go back because you have something that you have to do. And you'll find out about it whenever, but you have to go back and tell your mom that Tommy's okay. He's with me." I said, "Oh, okay." So I just turned around, and these people were escorting me, and they were talking to me. And I woke up, and of course I was in a recovery room, and then I had to spend 2 weeks in the hospital. And at that time, they didn't do a lot of outpatient stuff. Um, I got home, and my mother asked me what happened, as if did anything happened. And I go, "I don't understand." She says, "Well, you you passed away. You died. You were dead for almost 10 minutes." And I went, "Oh." I goes, "Why?" She goes, "Well, did anything happen?" I go, "Oh, yeah, something. Yeah, there was something." I said, I told her the story, and I went, and I said, "This woman," and I described her, and she said her name was Rose. And she said she was my grandmother, your mother. And she told me to tell you that Tommy is okay. And she went white and sat down with her mouth hanging open. She goes, "Rose is your grandmother's name. We don't talk about past relatives that, passed on in our family for whatever reason. I don't know why." And she took out an old book, which was an old Bible, with everybody's births and deaths written in as a chronicle from way before my time until now, And there was the name Rose, and I said, "Oh, yeah." She said, "You were my grandmother, right?" And I said, "Yeah." "I was your grandmother." She said, "Yeah." And she goes, and I said, "And she had a blue pendant. She had a blue stone pendant on a silver chain." And she went up. She says, "Wait a minute." She went upstairs, and in her drawer, she pulled out a box, brought it down, opened it up, and there was the pendant. Is her grandmother's pendant, her mom's pendant that she kept all this time. And it had it had her picture in the pendant. It was one of those pendants that opened up, had my mother's picture in it. And I went, "Oh." oh, yeah, that's the pendant, you know. So that was the interesting, and that was about it. I mean, I finally did tell her about my, 5-year-old one. At that point, we discussed everything, now. And I'm sorry, it's getting darker here. Where I'm up in the Adirondacks, so I'm going to do that flashlight thing here. It looks like.
You just don't put it under your chin, and you look like Dracula.
Yeah. Well, it's starting to do that for some reason. But anyhow, as far as there was only one other thing, and I forgot what was the gentleman's name before me that talked.
Steve.
Steve, yeah. Years later, I had a lot of different paranormal experiences that I was just too many to mention, but one that was in particular was about 35 years ago, and it spurred me to build a device. And my wife and I get sick, and we would go downstairs, sleep on the couch so that we didn't disturb the other person. And that one night, it was a Friday night, and it was 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. Obviously, it was 2 o'clock because there's a clock by the stand. And I got up to see, for whatever reason, eyes slammed open. I started walking down the stairs, and I hear this young woman singing 6 notes 3 times each. What the heck? And it was the voice, and I could still feel it and hear it. I have to say, it's probably mostly felt than heard, but it was heard as much. It was loud, but it was not loud where it hurt your ears. It was loud all around you. It was just very present. And it was the most beautiful female, melancholy voice you could ever hear. It was absolutely gorgeous. And I got down to the landing of the stairs, and she sang again. Then I got to the bottom of the stairs, and I got into the living room, and she sang again. It was coming out of the dining room, which was right below our bedroom where I was sleeping. And I said to my wife, I said, "Did you hear that?" She goes, "Oh yeah, somebody's singing," because she wasn't feeling well, And so she she says, she fell back to sleep again. And I'm a musician. I remember the notes that were played, and nobody could tell me what that was. I've had quite a few psychics that are friends of mine come over, and I told them about it, and they said, I've never heard of anything like that. And there's a lot of speculation, but it actually had a huge impact on my life and how I thought about things for some reason. And it actually prompted me to invent a few devices. I mean, I'm an electronics engineer as well. And I got a lot from the time I was 5 until I get present day. At 70, I am now. There's been so many strange occurrences centering around frequency and vibration, which we all know is universal.
And I think when part of us, passes, if the part that's not resonating as love gets fractured off, it continues to find its way back to that remembrance and become whole again. And maybe we're experiencing these other dimensions, obviously, side by side, and some of us wake up to that vibration.
Yeah, honestly, I've tried to reconnect with whoever that was, but it was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard in my life. The most beautiful was for lack of words, it was angelic, and it made you feel good. It had that. I've used those frequencies that were given to me. It was given to me for a reason. I still don't know what that is. I'm starting to fade out here.
Yeah. I was gonna ask Rebecca, and you had your experience. You had a car accident. You didn't specifically leave your body.
Right. Well, after I had that spontaneous healing of cancer when I was about 26, Whenever I had a serious physical thing come up, I could find that pathway to that higher realm of consciousness and neutralize it. And one day when I was probably around, well, I was in my late 30s, I was driving my car and I hydroplaned smack into a pickup truck. And it went slow motion, like Amanda was talking about. Everything slowed down. I didn't have my seatbelt on. And I thought, oh, I wish I'd fastened my seatbelt, but I hadn't. I broke the windshield with my head. The steering wheel collapsed under my chest. The engine dropped down, so it didn't crush me, thank God. Everything in the car was buckled. Roof. I had a coin purse with it was metal. It was bent when I finally found it. Everything, but I didn't even crack a bone. I literally walked away. And I remember the thoughts that I had. The policeman showed up, and just before he got there, I was thinking, I really can't go yet because I haven't done anything. You know, it was like I knew it wasn't time. And I felt the protection. It was like being in a cocoon of love and just, I mean, I still remember when I had to go to the hospital because I really couldn't walk away and go home. So I went to the hospital and they x-rayed me from head to toe. And this young doctor came into the ER and looked in my eyes and he said, "You didn't even crack a bone." It was almost like he couldn't believe it, you know, but it just seemed normal to me at that point. But as I think back on it, I mean, I hit my forehead and broke the windshield. It was not a hole, but it was all cracked. Didn't even crack it. My head, that is. So yeah, I mean, to me, the supernatural is natural. And we can do some pretty amazing things. But it's wonderful to talk to other people that have had these experiences because those 3D people.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting to be able to, you know, bring you all together here and have this type of discussion. Does anybody want to just chime in terms of, this is a common question that I've asked and other people would ask people who've had near-death experiences or similar experiences. Why does it happen to some people and not to others? Are people on a specific path, the wrong path?
You know, it's funny because each time I had made contact through the near death or near life, whatever, they always said I had to come back to something I needed to do. So, I mean, that's just me. I don't know about anybody else, but both times, both messages are exactly the same.
Anybody else want to chime in? Was there a specific theme to the situation of what, you know, what you're like, you know, go ahead, Steve.
I can tell you my theme. You know, they told me about ascension and evolution of humanity and that they would be back. And then they did come back, and it was shortly after the car accident that was a lot like Rebecca's, where I flipped a car over at about 75 to 85 times. 3 people flew out of the car, broke the dashboard with my face, broke the side window. So it was evolution and bringing the Christ into embodiment, love, in other words, helping people embody more love and evolve as a species. Eventually, one day, you know, we're going to need to feed more on the sun's energy. And I know that's a big part of this about what's going on. So it's planetary, but it's a collective mind coming together in one frequency or one bandwidth, if you will.
Yeah. I know for most of the people, your frequency was shifted by your experience, which created you resonated at a different frequency, which created a change in your reality in terms of what you could handle and not handle in terms of people that could be in your life and situations. And I mean, after many times when people go under this type of stress, I guess it takes a while to assimilate back into what you once knew.
When that voice returned the second time, the embodiment within me, it was like being a child on Christmas Eve, or a child who waited the longest time ever to get their favorite toy, and you were just about to go get it, times a million. And it was like I couldn't sleep, I couldn't you know, and I was seeing spirits, trying to separate, you know, God from, you know, what was good, what was bad, what was me, what wasn't. And it turned out, you know, I was chasing a charge or a feeling, and it was love. And I had to learn how to cultivate that, not spend it down, not ground my energy anywhere, and just work on that and show how other people how to do it, to become sovereign and out of the matrix, if you will.
Do you think that some of you, I think we obviously we all choose the path in the life we're going to reincarnate into. Does anybody have any recollection of the specific path that you would follow or you would experience? Because sometimes we have, you know, some type of deja vu or a specific situation where we say, oh, I think I planned that experience, or I may have planned that experience for a particular reason. I mean, not a lot of people wouldn't be cognizant of it. Rebecca, you think you want to share?
Oh, definitely. I've had recall a couple of times of, I think it was my immediate past life in World War II. I was a pilot. I was shot down. I was with the Royal Air Force flying cargo to the mainland. Just recently, I went on Google and I came up with Donald Douglas as the pilot. And there was a Donald Douglas who flew with the Royal Air Force.
Wow.
Yeah. And it kind of freaked me out when I saw that. But I was shot down. I was in a hot, steamy little room waiting for a doctor to come in and do something to save my life. And I was too far gone. I was all burned and messed up. And in this life, I set myself up to want to figure out spiritual healing. So I created this bad diagnosis. It was my greatest fear. I was always afraid of cancer. So I manifested it. But I was at the crossroad. Which way you're going to go, medical or spiritual? And I took the leap of faith, and it worked for me. And I went like that. It was so fast. I went from the worst, heaviest fear I have ever felt when that doctor gave me the diagnosis and I couldn't shake it off, to complete freedom. And yeah. And I think that's why one of the reasons we incarnate is to constantly be overcoming. I like the way Steve was talking about it with, I can't remember exactly how he said it, but we're practicing in this dimension. It's almost like a game we're playing, right?
It definitely feels like a quantum video game or experience. And, you know, it's all about identity, you know, and embodiment, and being able to move between embodiments and dimensions, not being bound, being able to turn on the switch between your mind and your heart and take that space back, expand at will, you know.
What did it
Don't you think that we're going to be like in demand with the ascension happening now for the people that are still, you know, to learn some of the stuff they've experienced? I think there's going to be a great demand for it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, go ahead, Steve.
I was just going to say, I can tell you just by telling my story, like I turned around and my calendar was full for like 3 months. So I think people need healing, and they're feeling that itch to remember themselves and return to truth, I think.
Yeah. I mean, interviewing different people and working myself with people in the Akashic Records and finding information and looking back, they're not, I would say most people are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, and even older, obviously trying to find out and connect to their child, you know, that childlike feeling or those traumas that they experienced. And what's interesting is I think the experiences that most of you have had have sprung you forward to a higher dimension to reach that in a sooner period of time. In other words, created this springboard of ascension.
And I think the past lives helped in a way. They're fragments that, you know, serve. The first one I ever had, just back to that real quick, was I was confused and sat down, kneeled at the cross and prayed to show me where all this is coming from. Because I had a thirst for God, trying to go to every church I could to talk to somebody about a spiritual war that nobody knew about. And I asked for this vision, and I had a vision of walking on a sandy road or like a dirt road, and it was so crystal clear. I could see my feet wearing sandals, and I could see two rivers to one side of me and another river on the other side. And then it ended. I'm like, well, thanks. You know, a lot of answers. Thanks, God. So I looked it up. Three rivers that came into one, because that's what happened. And it was the Euphrates River, and it was the parting of the Red Sea. And I was like, so some of this is coming from a past life. And that was asking God directly.
Very interesting. Amanda, you spoke once about the concept of surrender. Maybe you could just elaborate a little bit on how that assisted you, or why it was so important, or why it's important for us to surrender.
Yeah, sure. When our car lost control, for some reason, I immediately went into this kind of like consciously and on purpose, this limp position where I lean back in my seat and I relax my muscles and I close my eyes as though a plane was taking off. And to this day, I can't quite explain exactly why I would react like that, because my partner that was driving, he was totally flipping out at the same time. But since then, like through some of the life review stuff, and it wasn't just life review from this life, it was going, into past lives as well. It became really clear to me that the reason that is what I chose to do, just kind of like surrender to the experience, was because I had trained and done that kind of thing in other lives, in different kind of incarnations around the world, in different faith systems. It came back to me of, going through initiations in like Egypt and learning how to do that, but under supervision from like a hierophant, from like an initiator. And so now for myself, I feel like this wasn't just like a one-time thing. And another thing that everyone's kind of said is that their early life had something a little unusual or paranormal. And I didn't remember this, but until later in this life review, but when I was like 3 or 4, I would have spirits in my room. I'd wake up when I was, 3 a.m, really suddenly and in a terror. And I couldn't just see them in my third eye. I could actually see them in my physical eye. And it was like they came from my dream or my nightmare. And then I woke up and I could still actually see them. And so I feel like for me, I was leaving my body and experiencing trauma, kind of like metaphysical trauma, back then, so that when the car accident came, it wasn't unusual to pop out of my body. Yeah.
Yeah, I just find the whole concept of the concept of surrender. We all go through experiences where I guess we're going to be consistently replaying the situations, or they're going to be reoccurring, so that we have that moment where we need to surrender to evolve into the next level. I mean, each person, either an accident, a disease, or some type of trauma has taken place, which pushed people forward, like a breakthrough. I know I remember Rebecca, you sharing about that experience in terms of having the cancer, as you just said. And for you, Steve, what was the point where you did surrender, where you felt this breakthrough take place?
I mean, there was so many points of like somebody else jumping into me, so to speak, and taking the wheel, and I knew it. As a kid, falling out of a tree from like 30 feet high, and there's a cement patio, and you hit every single branch on the way down, and you're flipping and spinning, and somehow you grab the last branch, but you're not even conscious that that's happening. Just periods of others jumping in to save me, put it that way. But I'd say the period of surrender was when I was tired of my own creations, of my trauma being projected through me out into relationships and partners and work, and my dissatisfaction. And I couldn't blame anybody else. I had to become accountable to love. So I did a lot of multidimensional work, with bringing everything into the moment of now and surrendering everything that wasn't love, and just dedicating myself to surrender on a routine, consistent basis. Look at myself like a computer that's just dumping data. All I'm doing is getting rid of data and bringing in more, But the point of surrender was say probably like 10 years ago when I just got tired of myself.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think it's interesting for people listening, because people may not even be in that place, but hearing that it's possible and it does take place is freeing to the soul, and comforting to know that you can live your life within your own boundaries and beyond, without having these these hang-ups or these roadblocks that we place in our path. I know, Rebecca, you spoke about the alpha state in terms of reaching a higher place, or being in touch with a higher dimension in that place, as opposed to a near-death experience where you crossing over to a different dimension itself. You want to share a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I trained like maybe over 3,000 people in how to go there on command, because what I've learned, I mean, we're all natural intuitives, but a lot of people have to train themselves to go into these altered states of consciousness without drugs. And when your brain is slowed down to 10, 12 cycles per second, as opposed to where we are at beta, that's where you can, reprogram your subconscious if you want to do that, or use your mind to connect to source, energy, God, and heal yourself. You can remote view, you can heal other people. But most people are just going around, in a hypnotic state, reacting to what's going on. And a lot of people are hungry to learn how to get more control over their minds, because they don't really get a manual when they go to school. That's the last thing they teach. They don't even touch on it, really. So people are hungry right now to learn. And I think, they want to revamp the educational system. My nephew just graduated from Yale University, very prestigious school, one of the best in the world. I wasn't impressed with what I saw. I love my nephew, and I was impressed by him, but the guy that gave a little speech, he didn't even dare talk about anything that was interesting. You know how everybody's kind of like not really deep anymore? We need more people. I love the idea of mystery schools and really digging into these topics, and that I'm joined the Rosicrucians for 5 years. I got initiated, first degree. I just love metaphysics, and I think people need to know how to work with their minds and not be afraid, because fear is a bad thing.
I wish I was taught that early,
Oh,
let's start Hogwarts. Let's do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
But the interesting thing is I'm looking at everybody here like a lighthouse that's put on a map and shining and emitting their own experience. That, not necessarily a lot of lighthouses, but naturally more the lighthouses themselves are just shining upon what's around them. And the experiences that you share, and the strength that you have to share these stories, and the wisdom and the platform that you're given to create or expand upon your experiences is so important. And I think that's what's happening anyhow in terms of social media and these types of interviews, or your own healing work that you all do, and the things that I do myself. I'm interested in the subject of UFOs and what lies beyond this universe. Interestingly, I've spoken to a few of you on that subject in terms of what you might have seen, and you expressed your experience. Recently, I met with a shaman from Ecuador he's from the Quechua tradition, which is in Ecuador, which is a connection with the elders and the alien beings that come and visit. So he shared with me his experiences of being taken in a ship and showing the waterways under the earth. And he also expressed to me some very interesting things that were mind-blowing to me, which were in the 70s or 80s, probably the 80s, he was taken to a 1,000-group meeting in the Amazon, where 1,000 people gathered from all the different cities in South America, but were chosen. And he was taken to the fields, and a mothership, the size of a football field, hovered overhead and then landed. And when the doors opened up, Jesus and Angel Michael appeared in body. And he
Wow.
said he expressed that they are one. They were one. And they were able to shape shift into each other. However, he saw Jesus's eyes as honey-colored eyes, a very distinct eye color that he never saw before. And in the company of Jesus and Michael were I would assume, as I know it, to be the Ashtar Command, or a group of blue-eyed beings, Nordic, some figure. He didn't describe the name of the group, but he described them in blue, with the bluest, clearest eyes and blonde hair in the company. And they were discussing the revelations of certain things that were taking place, but they chose him out of the 1,000 people to come to communicate with them. And he's a high-end being, and in his company, you feel his elder statesmanship of just repeating words, but not looking you in the eyes, so to speak. Just releasing information that is so beyond the concept of what anybody can comprehend. So with that information, I was so invigorated with energy the next day. And then I went to my family, we had a barbecue, and I just was so willing, I so desired to just share what I heard. Of course, if you're at this level and it's down here at the barbecue, it was just going like this.
Wow.
But that was such an enlightening experience for me to hear that information. And he spoke about COVID in terms of certain things that took place, of what happened. I don't want to get into the names of things because I don't know how it gets censored or cut off, but he explained how things were manipulated by a specific reptilian and regular good alien versus bad alien that were taking place on different dimensions simultaneously over the last 3 years. And that the northern polar shift that existed on this earth was curtailed from it spinning completely out of control by, let's put it this way, the good alien, so to speak. And the ozone was patched over. He was given this information 10 years ago, before much of this information is actually happening right now, and expressed exactly the war, what's taking place, and how this was set up and deliberated, and what's taking place between different groups. So that was a high-end story based upon that. And I know that, Rebecca, you had experiences as a flight attendant in terms of, and as a younger person, when you were younger, you said you were sitting by the beach and you saw ships come by.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amanda, have you ever had any experience?
Yeah. And what was similar between the experiences, and there weren't too many, there were just like, I think 3. All 3 times I had been living out in nature or off grid for some time. So my frequency was a little bit more attuned to those, those natural cycles. And there was always like, it looked like a shooting star, but faster. And you know how the shooting stars have a bit of an arc sometimes, like there's kind of like this was more like a perpendicular straight line. So it would go faster than a shooting star and stop. And then there was a slight pause, and then it would shoot up like that. So like this the right angle thing that was already mentioned. And then another one was actually in broad daylight. I was living in Western British Columbia. I was living in my van. So again, like outside in the mountains all the time. And it was twilight. The sun was just about to go down, but it's still quite bright. And this one was like, it looked like a small airplane with lights on in the day, up very high, but it was moving extremely slow, like almost slower than an airplane. And as it moved along, and again, like I was driving my van, I was looking out the window, and I normally don't turn and look out the sides at all, but something took my attention, and I looked out the side window, and then I had to slow down, and then saw something, and then pulled over. Anyway, as it moved along, there were these almost looked like a shooting star coming straight down, and then it would move along, and another one would go straight up. And so as it moved, it was shooting very methodically, though. I don't know if anyone else has seen that one, but those have been my experiences.
Steve, you have any experiences with?
Yeah, the first time I spoke with, or they spoke to me, were Arcturians, who are, I suppose, like a more of a purplish hue being. But I could hear them and I couldn't see them. I could feel them, and I could tell by the way they were speaking, they were a lot stronger and a lot different than spirits. So they were talking about, evolution again, and purification, and things like that. What was coming for humanity. And, here I am, the nutcase, talking about food shortages like 5 years before anything. So I told them to basically go away, because I was shutting everything out. I didn't believe they were who they were. So they went away. They came back again when I was able to organize myself and look up some of the things they told me, that they were from the Galactic Federation of Light, that I was part of the Divine Council of Nine, which I've never heard of. And I looked it up, and I was able to find some references. And I'm a skeptic. I'm still a skeptic. I have to have something happen, and something happen, and something happen. And then I'm convinced. And sure enough, it started with that. And then they would show up in my healing sessions, or they would give me information about human design. And then dreams of going onto a ship where everything is white, and I'm wearing like a white suit, and I have no hair, I'm bald. Children in like pods all around in this one room, and I could feel the children's intelligence like coming off of them.
Wow.
And then being in like different medical rooms where I look around and there's a couple more people dressed like me in that white slick suit, and they're bald. So yeah, a lot of communication over the years, and assistance, you could say. Different orbs in my room, things like that. Now it's like normal to me. Like, yeah, whatever.
Wow. Do you think that because people have a higher level of genetic makeup connected to specific races, that they're more watched over? And so therefore, if they do have experiences and they don't remember, that near-death experiences or such encounters create a remembrance and a connection?
There's got to be some cellular memory connection with DNA for sure.
So, right.
Because you look strictly at, epigenetics for one, and then another, that the fields give order to the matter. Otherwise, we'd float away in a million molecules. So there's something being imprinted there.
Yeah, you've had experiences yourself, Rebecca, but I don't know if you want to share that.
Well, I had this waking vision one night when I was sitting around with a couple of girlfriends way back in the 60s. And I blinked my eyes, and just like I'm looking at you guys on the camera, this man appeared to me. Now, he had those honey brown colored eyes, like you were describing, that Jesus had, but he had on a soft linen shirt, open. He just had it open at the neck. He had a very neatly cut beard, mustache, brown hair, very handsome. He was bent over like a table, and he just looked up and beamed at me with this amazing, unconditional, loving smile. I blinked my eyes again, and there he was, just like I was with a real person. But my two stewardess girlfriends were in my apartment with me, and I said to them, I can't believe what just happened. But, like when we have these experiences, it doesn't mean anything to them. They don't even know what to make of it. But that stayed with me my whole life, because I'll never forget what he looked like. It was so powerful. This unconditional, loving smile that he gave me, just to let me know, I guess he's in this other, now maybe he's the guide. A few times in my life, I've heard this male voice over to the left that has given me information that was completely accurate and relevant. Maybe about 3 or 4 times I've heard this male voice. Now, I don't know if that's my spirit guide, but I keep waiting for him to give me a little direction right now. Let me clue me in, but I haven't gotten a message lately.
Yeah, it's interesting. I interviewed a guy. His name is Sam the Illusionist. He's from India.
I love him. I was watching his videos.
Yeah, and he channels different alien groups and their message specifically. So you know the connection is going on a specific channel. When I did an Akashic record reading, and I asked where the Ashtar command was from. So I heard the third ring of Saturn. And then when we were talking during the interview, he said, well, you know, the Ashtar, they come from the third ring of Saturn. And I said, wow, it's so interesting that
Yeah.
the communication or the understanding of what lies beyond what we can see and what we're able to draw in and take in. Such a fascinating concept. Steve, you received some information in terms of what you tuned out a little bit, but was anything more relevant than what you discussed or that you can share?
Well, I mean, like what you just said, what goes beyond our understanding. It's almost like we're only able to tune in a certain vibratory field while we're in these bodies, and everything else, even though we interpret it as existing outside of us, is within us, you know, the whole universe. I mean, anything else, they showed me the Trinity. Obviously I was 4, I wasn't religious. They showed me 3 energies almost in like a triangle, and then I was in the center, and they taught me how to pull energy down from above, breathe it up from below, and begin creating a sun within my center. They talked about singularity, and the law of one, becoming the law of one in the flesh, things like that, and embodiment. 0 point energy, learning how to ground my energetic system, my nervous system, to a maximum ground state, to where I'm an individualized particle field, so I'm unaffected by anybody else. But learning, you know, how to do it at will, control the flow of neurons, control when I can basically create a large enough charge to push any lower embodiment out, lower patterns or thoughts of behavior that used to exist within me as a young man. And then they taught me about the divine blueprint, how every human being has a divine blueprint, that we're all made in the image of our creator, and we can claim this for our redemption, for our purification, for our healing. But the trick is we have to believe we are that, just like we believe we're all these other things. The world and people tell us what we believe becomes us. So you want to believe your sovereign energy. You want to believe your love, because it has no attachments to guilt, shame, things like that. So they also taught me how to speak to lower energies to get them to move. So I found that to be very helpful, is speaking to my ailments, speaking to my diseases, speaking to the pain stored within my body, and then witnessing how powerful I am as a creator in the process. But reality is all through embodiment, you know, and I got tired of embodying false identities, false belief systems, and I just wanted more of what was real, of the human experience, you know. And it was like when I had what I would kind of describe as a walk-in or exchange, if you will, because it certainly felt like that. It was like I was learning how to do things for the first time, and I could appreciate life again. It was such a rapid exchange.
I like what you were just saying about the movement from, you know, when you're a younger man, and that purification of those lower elements. And what I've noticed for myself is often I will have in my dream time just kind of pop into the astral world, and based on where my vibration is and what my focus has been on in my day-to-day life, that's kind of the level of clarity and crispness and purity I'm noticing where I'm landing in the astral. And you know, in the new age community and new age spirituality, there's so many people that are channeling and able to, you know, to go to these different places, but there's also, like, you know, some distortion and mixed information. And I started to notice when I was more clear and doing my work, when I would pop into the astral, I was feeling the love and the high vibration and the purity of the beings that I would come into contact with. There was no doubt in my mind that there was any deception or kind of like a little bit of manipulation. But then in these other times where it was, you know, part of my dark night of the soul or whatever, when I would pop into the astral, I would still encounter beings that sometimes even like physically looked like those higher beings, but what I was getting off of them was a little bit deceptive and a little mixed. So sometimes they would have, you know, information that was beyond what I knew, but at the same time, it wasn't so clear and crisp. So this is teaching me, and later I found Rudolf Steiner's work, and he, you know, he talks about when we advance one level in spiritual development, we should be advancing like at least 3 in purification in order to always be able to navigate that world. So that's been big for me.
Yeah, I think the level of our own darkness, right, is the extent that we displace onto others and we feel in others. In other words, if we heal ourselves, we have the capacity to heal others. But in actuality, we really are healing ourselves in the process of helping others as well. So there's that mirrored image of what we do, right, for others is really doing for ourselves. And I guess feeling the darkness within someone else and the darker images or imagery that we get is our own inner world reflected outward into some capacity. I know each one of you has a specific website in terms of the work or work that you do, healing work or manifestation work. Maybe you want to just share a little bit, Steve. You want to just tell us where people can reach you and, you know, where you're, what you're doing.
Sure. You can reach me at trinityquantumhealth.com. I had to remember because I just changed websites not too long ago. Or you can email me at trinityhealingreiki@gmail.com. So trinityquantumhealth.com. Or email me at trinityhealingreiki@gmail.com.
Yes, I've had a session with Steve and it was very nice.
Thank you.
Yep. Amanda?
Yeah, my website is www.lionspiritcoaching.com. And my contact is on there, and I do spiritual coaching, trauma coaching.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, and Rebecca?
My website is RebeccaTripp.com, RebeccaTripp.com. And you can find my book, Secrets of a Metaphysical Flight Attendant. It's also on Amazon, but I'll send you a signed copy if you buy it on my website. And then I've got my Mega Manifestation Method course that came out this year, where I've taken some of the most powerful things that I've found to help people manifest better health, more abundance, whatever. And that's my course that's on there. And I do one-on-one coaching. So it's all on my website. I have a YouTube channel too. That's how I met Adam. And I guess we all have a YouTube channel. Or,
Yes.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah, well, I'll share all the information in the link in the description below. And if you could all leave us with some little short message that if somebody came over to you and, you know, said, what's the most important thing you can tell me right now? What would you say to them? So Steve, go ahead.
I would say to know your identity and don't sacrifice it through your thoughts and emotions for approval. Be your authentic self and let things align, and your experience will be much richer and more rewarding.
Excellent. Amanda?
Yeah. To trust the people that talk about these experiences, I definitely do. Everything that you guys have said today has really resonated. And with that, if you don't, and you want to put out the intention or the prayer to remember more of who you really are, because what we are experiencing and showing up here as is a real limited version of the whole rest of us. So there's so much more.
Thank you. And Rebecca?
I would just say that because we're living in the time of the Great Awakening, and that's why we all chose to be here at this time, everyone out there that's here, it's the paradigm shift is going from we think the outer world is controlling us, but it's really the inner world of mind is controlling the outer world of matter. And that's why studying metaphysics and the things we're talking about is so fascinating. It does give us sovereignty, as Steve was talking about.
Well, Okay, so on that note, I want to thank everybody for joining me here today, this evening, and giving me the opportunity to share your inspiration, your journey, and your path to a sense of enlightenment, a sense of awakening, and an ascension. And each person in some capacity goes through a dark night of the soul of feeling lonely, of feeling shut out and not being understood, although trying to fit in some capacity, specifically with jobs you may have or with people we once knew. But when that great shift occurs and you find yourself detached from what we once knew, I guess as my feeling is we find our strength, and then we become a lighthouse for society and for the universe. So I thank you for joining me and shining your light.
Thank you, Adam.